No. It's 5:59.
Does anybody know what time the 6 o'clock meeting is?
Madam Mayor, it's 6 o'clock.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this Tuesday, December 5th, regular City Commission meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Mayor Pam Triolo,
Here.
Vice Mayor Scott Maxwell,
Here.
Commissioner Omari Hardy,
Here.
Commissioner Andy Moroso.
Here.
Commissioner Herman Robinson. Here. Thank you.
If everyone would please rise for the invocation and the pledge. On behalf of Vice Mayor Scott Maxwell, the invocation.
God of all creation, we come before you today to give you honor and praise. You are worthy of praise. You are the source of all that is good. You're the source of all of our blessings. Thank you for every gift that we have been given. We thank you for the opportunity to come together and gather today. We ask for your hand and blessing in this meeting. We ask that you would guide and direct our meeting so that it is full of wisdom, productivity, and respect for one another. Thank you for helping us to accomplish our work and our goals this day. Amen.
Commissioner Moroso, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Okie dokie. Hello, everyone. It's been a little while. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Do we have any additions, deletions, or reordering?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Then we'll move right into our presentations. We're very honored to have with us Dorothy Jacks, Palm Beach County Property Appraiser, here for a new homestead exemption law tutorial for us. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and the members of the commission and Lake Worth residents also. So nice to see so many active people in your community. I wanted to just begin today by talking a little bit about your tax roll, and then I'll talk in a little more detail about the third homestead exemption proposed to appear on the ballot in 2018. Lake Worth has a parcel count of ever so slightly over 13,000 parcels. I think it's interesting that of those, and it'll become more significant later, just 40% are homesteaded. So 5,200 of them have a homestead exemption on them. Market value of $2.6 billion, taxable value of about $1.6 billion in 2017. You were one of the highest increasing cities in the county in 2017. Of the 39 cities, I think you were fourth in percentage increase year over year, which is just fantastic. I mean, very good news. It says a lot about the progress of the city. Just a little bit of information I've garnered from our appraisers about 2018 and what that might look like. It's still very early in our season to give you sort of good numbers, but we have seen a good number of ever increasing residential property sales. That's a good sign. That means that your residential component, which is always a big component of every city, is probably going to see another increase in 2018. We're watching that closely. I think probably the reason for that is you still have a lot of affordable options in Lake Worth. Some communities are pricing themselves out, as it were, and in that sort of mid-market range of, we would probably consider that somewhere from 200,000 to about 400,000. You still have a good bit of inventory, which is helpful to all the communities that have that. We're also about to begin a study of the Lake and Lucerne corridors, the commercial corridors, because again, we've had quite a bit of sales activity there, which helps us. It helps us to create or derive value from those sales, and so we're working on that right now. And I'll probably have some information for you on that in the spring sometime. We're also pleased to see the commercial development happening off of Lake and Lucerne, but behind it on the nearby streets. If you think about somewhere a success story like Delray Beach, that's what happened there. They initially had a lot of activity on Atlantic Avenue, and then you started seeing it move back off of Atlantic Avenue, and you're starting to see that, which is great. Also, the activity on Dixie itself. Certainly that's been very positive over the last year. We're also pleased to see your work in your industrial work happening off of Boutwell Road and that area. That's very good. Certainly the availability of proximity to I-95 is very important to industrial interests, either I-95 or the Turnpike, but certainly to those artery roads, and you have that, which is very helpful in that sector. And I think that sort of leads to the conversation about the third homestead, which is that a wide variety of property types is a good place to be as we move forward with the uncertainty of what is going to happen with homesteaded property. As you know, I've been in the property appraiser's office for close to 30 years now, and since I arrived, the complexity of the homestead exemption has grown and grown and grown. Initially, the homestead exemption was, in its infancy, a $25,000 single exemption deducted from market value, the market value we said. It was worth about $500 to $600 in taxes, and that was the end of it. Well, over time, it has evolved. There is a second homestead exemption that occurs on value between between 50 and 75,000. So in other words, if a person's home has to be worth more than 50,000 in order to get that second homestead, but there is that. In addition, there is the cap on homesteaded property. So homesteaded property cannot increase more than 3% or the change in the CPI, whichever is less year over year. That is also holding down the value of homesteaded property, or at least the value that is derived for taxes, that people pay taxes on. Then there was the addition of portability, the ability for a homesteaded owner to carry or port their benefit from one home to another. The rules regarding the cap had always been that when a property sold, the home went to market, which it still does, but now that reduction in taxes that person was paying on that home, they can transport or port to a new homesteaded property. So portability is, again, although a very nice benefit to all of us who receive homestead exemption, is again taking away from the tax that a homestead might pay, a house that is homesteaded might pay. So on new homes, instead of the owner paying at the market value and then their cap beginning the next year when they homestead, they now are paying on something less than that value. So here we arrive at the third homestead, which is what has been proposed, approved by the legislature, and is now going to be on the ballot in 2018. So this will be a statewide election, ballot initiative, and what it is proposing is to add another $25,000 homestead reduction. This one would occur on value between $100,000 and $125,000 in value. So what that means is that a person has to be paying at least taxes on $100,000 before they start receiving benefit of the third homestead. So let me give you an example. If a home is worth $200,000, that's its assessed value, what it potentially could pay tax on, the person would receive a homestead on the 0 to 25,000. They'd receive a homestead on 50 to 75,000, and they'd receive a homestead on 100 to 125,000. This will be another about $300 tax savings. The reason it's not $500 like the first homestead is that you would continue to pay the school board their millage. And the school board millage is usually almost half of everyone's millage rate. It can be a little less if you're in a city, but it's between 40 and 50% of somebody's millage rate. So the tax savings from the third homestead is another $300. But it is not everybody is going to receive it. And the reason for that is there are many homes that are actually not assessed at more than $100,000. So I'll give you an example. First, there's plenty of condominiums that aren't worth $100,000. But the other example of it is somebody who is currently homesteaded who is capped at below $100,000. So I use my parents as an example. They live in an old home in Palm Beach Gardens. They lived there for 35 years. The home is probably worth $200,000, but because they've lived there for 35 years and have been homesteaded, they're paying tax on less than $100,000 in assessed value because that 3% has just clicked up year over year, but nothing like the appreciation of the house. My parents will not receive benefit of the third homestead because they are not above $100,000. So what does that mean in Lake Worth? Let's bring it right back here. If you look at the 2017 numbers, and of course these will adjust, of your 5,250 homesteaders, only 1,975 of them will receive the third homestead. 1,975. So just under 2,000 of the 5,000 will receive the homestead. That will equal in 2017 dollars, and this will not affect us until the 19 roll if it's passed. In 2017 dollars, that's 245,000 tax dollars that the city will receive each year from that point out. So the third homestead, again, it's not going to affect everybody. It's not enormous numbers because of the business with the, it won't apply to everybody, but it is something to think about year over year as you move forward. And certainly that people who, as their value increases, they will get the exemption, if that makes sense. They're not paying tax on it now, but as their value goes up over 100,000, you won't get that money because that money will be exempted. You see, so those other 3,000 people who might not right now be able to get benefit of the homestead, as their value increases, you won't see that increase because their homestead will kick in at 100,000, and from 100 to 125, they won't pay any tax. So I know that's an awful lot of information, but it is the round picture of what the third homestead will look like. And at this point, I'd be more than happy to answer some questions about the homestead issue, or certainly about any of the other issues I mentioned, or anything else in Lake Worth to do with property taxes. I appreciate you letting me come and speak to you.
Oh, thank you very much for coming, Commissioner Hardy.
Yes. Sometimes I am surprised that the legislature hasn't abolished our ability to levy taxes at all. But, when it comes to the Save Our Homes 3% cap, right? So that only applies to homesteaded properties. Doesn't apply to commercial, doesn't apply to non-homesteaded properties at all.
Correct.
Okay. And then the second thing was that basically because we have so many people that maybe have been holding on to their property for a while, their taxable value of their property hasn't gotten to that point where they would benefit from the third homestead exemption. Does that mean then, I guess, as properties change hands in a rising market, that more of our homesteaders would probably qualify for that exemption?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Very, very astute you to work that out. Absolutely. The more transactions that occur, the more chance that you would be able to recoup more taxes, but also owners would then, that 100,000, 125,000 would kick in because the prior owner's benefit would go away, their cap would go away, and the new owner will basically start fresh. Of course, if the new owner is porting in from another homesteaded property somewhere else, that may or may not happen. It all gets very individualized at that point.
And that was one thing I didn't fully understand, was the portability of the homestead exemption. I guess, could you explain that mechanism to me again, and maybe it's, it kind of,
Sure.
Sure.
So if my home has, and this is all values set by our office. So if my home has a market value of 100,000, you will use my parents as an example, and they're paying their assessed value because of the cap is only, I'm sorry, is 200,000. Their assessed value is 100,000. They have $100,000, the differential between those two numbers, that if they chose to move to another home in Florida, they could take that $100,000 with them and immediately reduce the market value of that new home by that 100,000, as if they had had a homestead there for a long time. So it's allowing them to take that benefit they built up over time from one home to another home. The idea behind it was that there was a point back in the mid 2000s when people wouldn't move because their taxes would double or triple at their new home. So this idea came about as a way to encourage or incentivize people to move if they wanted to, not to allow their taxes, the fact that their taxes were going to go up so much at a new home, to stop them from considering moving. So that's where it came from. But of course, the downside to it is that it does impact municipalities and the county and everybody, school, everybody is affected by portability because it does keep the values down. It stops that natural process of turnover in the values of property.
thank you.
I do want to also, you don't mind, I just want to make sure to make you aware that there is another cap on non-homesteaded property. It's called the 10 cap. It's 10%, and it's on every property that is not homesteaded. Now, 10% is a much higher threshold. A lot of properties don't gain 10% a year. But if you had a commercial property, a piece of vacant land, any kind of industrial, anything that is not homesteaded, a rental property, a seasonal residence, it cannot increase more than 10% a year. And if it does, say it goes up 15%, our office can only raise it 10%, and then the next year we can recapture, as it were, that other 5% and keep moving.
Do you mind if I follow up to that? So that applies even if there are significant renovations to a property?
Oh, no. If there's renovations to the property, we are going to add value on top of that capped value. Okay. And that works for homestead as well.
And they will be taxed on that value?
Oh, yes. So if you, for instance, had a homesteaded property, you had the 3% cap on it for some time, you were paying a much lower assessed value, and you chose to build a garage or add a pool, we are going to come along that next year. We're going to take the value that improvement made to the property and tack it on to the top of your capped value, reset it at the higher value, and then you'd continue to move forward.
Okay.
Same with commercial.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Amoroso?
Dorothy, I just wanted to thank you for being here tonight, and thank you and your staff. I've mentioned to the dais before that we were working directly. I've been working directly with you on some properties, and I want to thank you. We were able to get some of those properties back on the tax rolls that we identified that weren't on the tax rolls. And it came to my office this afternoon. There's 2 more I'd like to hand you, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
They're assessed at $500,000 and they're paying no taxes. Okay. So the citizens of Lake Worth would just like you to look into that and see what we can do, if there's anything that can be done. But I want to thank you for all your hard work and the staff's hard work for helping Lake Worth.
Thank you. Absolutely. More than happy to help, always.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Nice to see you again. I was wondering if you could help us put some of these numbers in perspective. For example, you mentioned that 40% of the homes, or the properties, I should say, here in the city are actually homesteaded. Could you comment to what percentage of homes countywide are homesteaded?
I actually don't know that number. It would be a good number if I had that in my head. And I'm going to go back and have it in my head. And in fact, I'd be happy to send it to you, certainly via mail. I will tell you that it's sort of, there are communities, and I can think of a few nearby. Lake Clark Shores is much more heavily homesteaded than Lake Worth. They have, I think they're in the 70 to 80% range homesteaded. Haverhill, another delightful town, very heavily homesteaded. There are some towns that, especially with the third homestead, are going to see more and more struggles just simply trying to make up that difference, which is again why I mentioned in Lake Worth, something you've done that I think is thoughtful is try to focus on value that is not going to be homesteaded. Because it's almost as if the homestead exemption is going to make a certain amount of residential property just a lost cause. Because it just continues to be eroded away. And while that's a very, without saying anything too controversial, while that's a very nice thing politically for our legislators to support the idea that you're going to give more to the taxpayers, the other side of it is that it's going to be tough on the communities they live in. Because some of these delightful places, which are very, very residential, are going to struggle. And I mean, in 5 to 10 years, they're going to have either hit their millage caps or have to look to other revenue sources in order to make up for the loss due to a heavily homesteaded community.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
You mentioned the legislature and their knack for gifting, if you will, to the homeowners. Several years ago, I did a very unscientific mathematical analysis of our properties and their property value, what I call property value per capita. I basically took the number that your office put out as far as our aggregate dollar value on property divided by the population and come up with a dollar value per capita. It was very interesting at that time that, and I also did it for all the municipalities in Palm Beach County. There were only 3 communities that had less property value per capita than Lake Worth, and they were out of the Glades. And my talking point for 15 years has been, how is it we live on the water next to Palm Beach and our property value per capita is barely above 3 of arguably the poorest communities in America. To that point, has there ever been an exercise or a computation of what it would look like if the state would just make homestead exemption very simple and say to everybody pays on the first $25,000. Then you can have your 25 or even 50,000, and then we go from there. It seems to me that the state would be further ahead in terms of revenue, and it would be a lot easier for you to implement and for everybody to understand. Has that calculation ever been attempted?
Again, over my years in this profession, they have talked about all kinds of different scenarios. And yes, that scenario has been discussed because it would seem to be more equitable. And they seem to get halfway there when they created the second homestead and didn't make it on the second 25,000, which of course they could have done. But instead they chose to go to that third, from 50 to 75,000, allowing everybody to pay on that 25 to 50,000, which was a good decision. But you're absolutely right. It would actually be even more equitable if everybody paid on the first 25,000 and then you start, making these deductions further because everybody would pay something.
Sure. Yeah. Unfortunately, in my opinion, because we don't have personal income tax and some of the taxes other states have, not that I'm a big tax guy, but we are very limited. And as Commissioner Hardy started to allude to earlier, Tallahassee's doing a really good job of squeezing us and our ability to, fund basic necessities of public services in our cities. But one thing the other number that you threw out earlier tonight was the overall assessed value of our property being $2.6 billion and our taxable value at 1.6. Seems to me there's quite a gap. And I'm just wondering if a 38% difference between the actual value or the market value and the taxable value, is that the norm?
I would call you absolutely in the range of norm. I've seen cities where that number is in the 50% area. 50% of their value has been eliminated by caps, homesteads, and other exemptions, government, municipal, and so forth and so on. So you are not the lowest in that percentage, but you're not the highest. You're probably right in the mid-range.
Because it's long been thought that a lot of nonprofits like to come to Lake Worth because it's historically it's been a little bit more cost effective for them to set up shop. But with those enterprises comes taking the property off the tax roll, and certainly that doesn't help us in our ability to provide the services to them.
True, but the other side of that too is that because you have a healthy role in other areas, commercial, industrial, you have a healthy mix of properties, you're able to sustain some of that. There are communities where I can think of Loxahatchee Groves. They have they They're a small area. They don't have a huge amount of value, again, primarily residential, but they have a great deal of agriculture, so that they have the ag class value, which is a much reduced value on much of their land. In addition, they have the lovely new Palm Beach State College campus, which of course is completely tax exempt. They have Church Row on Okeechobee Boulevard, which is all tax exempt. So you're making good plans here to allow for, certainly a flavor of nonprofits is important in any community. I mean, it's a part of who we are, but you're right. There is a balancing act there that has to be maintained.
Which is why it's so very important that you have a real balance of commercial and residential industrial uses. Thank you again. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hardy?
I'm sorry, just two questions, I guess. There's been a lot of, I've heard people use lots of different numbers as to the number of properties or the percentage of properties that are off the tax rolls here because of their nonprofit status. Do you have an official number for us?
Yeah, and actually, it's not too high. It's I looked at that just today. What is called charitable, religious, scientific, or literary. That would be well, it's a term probably that could be removed now, but there in the old days there were private libraries and that sort of thing. There are actually only 129 properties that are receiving those exemptions. Now it's almost $43 million in exempt value, but it's not a terribly high number. You actually have, now again, these are parcels, so it's not a good equation because sometimes you'll have multiple parcels in what is thought of as one property. You have 150 local government properties, 13 state government properties. So those are sort of the bigger numbers of properties that are getting those full exemptions. Government property is surprisingly often the highest value exempted because schools, for instance, big campuses, large tracts of land are actually quite valuable. And a place that has heavy schools can be very effective and affected, and places which have state and federal lands too.
And my second and last question is, I understand that not all counties will be affected by the potential third homestead exemption. And, I understand there's basically a rich county, poor county divide, that basically poor counties would be exempted. I'm just interested in the process by which a poor county gets exempt, like what sorts of qualifications do they have to meet? And I just want to be clear that doesn't apply to cities, poor cities in rich counties?
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
There are, I believe, 14 fiscally constrained counties in the state. Now, that's a designation that is determined by the Department of Revenue. And I am actually not, I know it's a mixture of a number of different taxes. So it's property taxes, it's sales tax, and so forth. But there is a formula that determines whether you fall under the fiscally constrained county headline. And if you do, there are state funds that are provided to your county to subsidize your lower revenue.
So, us being I believe we're the second poorest city in Palm Beach County. We have our friends out in the Glades that are very poor. We're basically going to be negatively affected by this, perhaps more so than less poor cities who might be in areas where the county itself is poorer than the cities that they are in.
Actually, you will be less affected by the third homestead than some of the larger cities and richer, if you will, cities even in our county because of their values being higher.
Okay.
So because they're homesteaded properties, I'll use an example. Palm Beach Gardens, which is quite a prosperous city, a lot of movement, a lot of new construction, not a lot of older inventory. They are going to have a bigger hit from the third homestead than West Palm Beach, which has a lot of older inventory and smaller units that aren't going to be affected by the third homestead. So it's interesting. It's sort of a reverse
Yeah.
reverse thought process. And I'd be happy, by the way, I'd be happy to send you all the list of each municipality, and you can see the number of homesteads affected based on the numbers we have now.
Okay.
We're just running them against 2017 numbers at the moment. And of course, when it goes into effect, it'll be on 2019, if it passes.
Thank you.
I have a question for you. As we start to see, like we have new single-family home communities developing and whatnot, so as we try to expand and improve our economy here locally, we probably will fall more into the trap of having that third homestead kick in as some of those properties that come in are at that point. And you said it's going to increase. So as the value of some of the lower priced or appraised homes increases as we improve, that $250,000 a year goes up to what we're losing.
Correct.
So as we get better, we lose more.
Correct. Because as the value goes up into that 100 to 125 range, although you have more value,
Right.
you're not going to receive the tax benefit of that. Now, when they're all up at $200,000, then you will be getting an increased revenue, certainly. I mean, the goal should be the same. It's just during that number is going to increase over time.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you so very much for coming. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to be with you. And as Commissioner Amoroso said, our office is more than happy to help anytime with any data or other information about your properties. We appreciate that you're so interested in your property values, and we're excited to watch Lake Worth.
Thank you very much. Okay, our next presentation is a proclamation declaring December 1st through the 8th, 2017 as World AIDS Week. Do we have a representative here from Compass?
Yeah, they're all here.
You're all here.
Come on up.
What are you doing?
Good to see you. Happy holidays. She'll come down to you. She'll come down to you.
Aren't you sick of me already? I have the honor of reading this proclamation on the actual day. We're celebrating the week here today, and I would like to thank everyone from Compass. If you haven't had a chance to see the most amazing quilt a piece of the quilt is actually on display at the Compass Center, and it'll floor you. And it's something really to be seen and appreciated and sat with for a while, to realize how things happen and how far we've come in this fight against AIDS and how much more we have to do to make a difference. So I'm honored to read this proclamation. Whereas more than 36.7 million people are currently living with HIV/AIDS worldwide, with an estimated 1.8 million new infections occurring each year, yet only 19.5 million people living with HIV are currently accessing life-saving antiretroviral therapy. And whereas the global spread of HIV infection and AIDS necessitates a worldwide effort to increase communication, education, and action to stop the spread of HIV/AIDS. And whereas the Joint United Nations Program on HIV/AIDS observes December 1st each year as World AIDS Day, leading and inspiring the world to achieve its shared vision of zero new HIV infections, zero discrimination, and zero AIDS-related deaths. And whereas the 2017 World AIDS Day theme is My Health, My Right, focusing on the right to health and exploring the challenges that people face around the world in exercising their rights. And whereas in the United States, over 1.2 million people are infected with HIV, with a new infection occurring every 13 minutes, resulting in more than 39,500 new annual infections. And whereas the Palm Beach County HIV Community Prevention Partnership and the Palm Beach County HIV Care Council, through its partners, are working together to renew HIV/AIDS awareness and to expand and strengthen the local effort to stop the spread of HIV/AIDS in Palm Beach County on World AIDS Day. Now, therefore, I, Pam Trial, the mayor of the city of Lake Worth, Florida, by virtue of the authority vested in me, do hereby proclaim December 1st through 8th, 2017 as World AIDS Week.
First off, thank you for the city of Lake Worth, the commissioners, the mayor. Lake Worth has been such a blessing to us over at Compass. If you haven't, I urge you to come by and see the quilt. It's the largest selection of the entire quilt in the state of Florida and potentially east of the Mississippi, with 22 panels representing the names of over 200 individuals who have lost their lives to HIV and AIDS. And it'll be on display at Compass until December 12th. So hopefully we'll see you then. Thank you.
Thank you guys very much. All right, folks, moving on to commission liaison reports and comments. We've got a big agenda, so bring them on. Commissioner Robinson, would you like to start?
Briefly, the internal auditor met with and he's off and running. Looking forward to the Christmas parade. Casino negotiations with the RFQ are ongoing. Looking forward to January 16th contract for that. Canvas program was attracting a lot of attention and deserved. South Palm Park has their Christmas lights up, and that's it.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of things. Try to keep it brief. Code enforcement, Mr. City Manager. When do you think we might be able to expect some sort of a progress report, if you will, of some of the new measures and ordinances and techniques and tactics that we've been deploying with some sort of measurement tools or whatever, that we can start gauging the effectiveness of code enforcement?
Madam Mayor, I may.
Please.
Based on the request we had received previously, with the limited number of meetings, we were trying to find a time before the end of the year. We couldn't do it. So we're looking either in the January, February set of meetings to bring something up. But staff is working on pulling together those statistics.
I'm more interested in, how you're going to create the benchmark standards and how relevant they are to really pointing us or shedding light on how effective code enforcement is. So I'm really looking forward to that. So you're talking after the first of the year?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And as Commissioner Robinson said, Christmas parade coming up on the 16th of December, Saturday. What time is that, Mr. City Manager? 6?
Yeah, my
6
mouse didn't
o'clock.
even move.
It's really cool. So I hope you all come out and take part in arguably one of the, I think probably one of the nicest Christmas parades here in Palm Beach County, particularly because we have it at night. It lends a little bit more magic to it with all the lights and things that are going on. So hope to see you all out there. And the other thing I want to say is happy holidays, Merry Christmas to all of you. I guess we won't see you until the next year. And I wish you all the healthiest of holidays and a wonderful new year.
Sure. So three of us were at the National League of Cities conference, and I was a rookie. So, of course, I was hazed. That's not true. Okay, that is not true. But I certainly learned a lot. And I see why my colleagues derive or place such a high value on involvement with the League of Cities, because it offers tremendous educational opportunities, both formal and informal, for elected officials. And I was pleased to take part because of that. That said, I just want to thank Gil Ziffer, president of the Florida League of Cities, for appointing me to the Land Use and Economic Development Policy Committee. And I also want to thank Andy Amoroso for inspiring me to get involved with the league, because as he always says, Lake Worth has got to be at the table. And it's really, really great to be able to bring Lake Worth to the table on these different policy committees when we're trying to advocate for the needs of not just our cities, but cities throughout the state of Florida. It's really great. We have a Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council meeting this Friday. I would encourage people who are interested in the quality of our waters to come to this meeting in particular. There's a guy whose name is Gary Roderick, who used to work for the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, who's going to be giving a presentation there about how, when we flush the toilet, I think we pretty much forget about it, or when we, run the drain or what have you. This stuff goes to a regional facility, and it gets processed into biosolids. And these biosolids basically get marketed to farmers who, as long as they're marketed as fertilizer, they basically get to smear huge quantities of this stuff onto their property in a pretty much unregulated fashion. And that stuff goes into our lagoon. It washes back into the Indian River Lagoon. It washes into Lake Okeechobee. So if you're concerned about stuff like that, I would encourage you to come to that meeting and learn more about it. The other thing is, and I'll piggyback on what Vice Mayor Maxwell just said about code. I just came from my own neighborhood association meeting on Monday, and it's really clear to me that there are lots of code issues that, especially if you live on the west side of the city, like myself and Commissioner Maxwell or Vice Mayor Maxwell do. It's just been around for 20, 25 years, and it's the same stuff. And I'm convinced that we need to take some different approach to what we've been doing to code to get a different result, because the stuff that people are bringing to me is stuff that's been going on for a long time, and everybody sees it, and we got to do something different. Otherwise, I think people would accuse us of being slow learners. And that might include getting more code officers. I spoke with a code officer who had 96 use and occupancy inspections in 60 days she had to do. 96 in 60 days. Now, what that means, and this is great that we're going and looking at places, but what that means is that when we're going and looking at these places and making sure they got their rental licenses, that means that they can't be out on the street spotting stuff and opening up cases in a more traditional way. So maybe we need to look at getting more code enforcement officers. And the other thing is fine reductions. This is something that affects some neighborhoods more than others. My neighborhood probably has a very high percentage of bad landlords, and I understand that this commission actually basically made it so that you can only reduce these fines by so much. I think we perhaps need to revisit that and raise the percentage threshold, because obviously we have people who just don't care and who view the 10% reduction as the cost of doing business here in Lake Worth, and I don't view that as acceptable at all. The other thing is quality of life issues. And the intersection of that and PBSO, again, coming from my neighborhood association, there are lots of things that we could be doing. Cars in my neighborhood, everybody knows that people are parking all the way up to the intersection, right? Especially on Sundays, all the way up to the intersection when everybody knows that there's a rule. You got to be, 15, 20 feet off the intersection? And everybody sees it. Obviously, our officers drive by it, and it's not being addressed. And this is quality of life and safety for people in my neighborhood, and I'm sure it occurs also in District 1. So that's all I have to say. I'll put a lid on it for now.
Commissioner Amoroso?
Canvas. I want to thank the CRA and Canvas for their beautiful project. Great murals. Huge amount of work done in 4 days. My juice bar, we were happy to feed them every day. So we were out there feeding them and making sure that they continued the work. They didn't want to leave the murals, so we were making sure the food was getting to them. National League of Cities, yes, if we're not at the table, we're on the menu. I can assure you that in North Carolina this year, Lake Worth was at the table. I'm happy to be the president of the Gay and Lesbian Advocacy Group for the National League of Cities, and I also sit on their Policy and Advocacy Board. And we're the ones that actually write the policy that goes to the White House. It's a little interesting now with the new administration, but I think we're moving forward and we're getting some things done in Washington on behalf of the National League of Cities. Also, the Florida League of Cities, I'm very happy to sit on their transportation board. Also, the vice mayor sits on one of their boards, and we'll be traveling up Thursday to sit on those boards and represent Lake Worth on a Florida level. Made mention to the Christmas parade on the 16th. Prior to the Christmas parade, the Kiwanis does Winter Wonderland in the plaza all day long. That's an event. Bring out the children. Great things going on. It's just a great day, and then the parade starts at 6.
Bike giveaway.
And we have the bike giveaway in the afternoon, so that's always fun. We'll be out there, pulling and hoping that everybody gets a bite this year. Tree lighting. Unfortunately, I was out of town for the tree lighting. If you don't know, I play Santa. Unfortunately, I was not there to play Santa, so a good friend of mine, Brian, played Santa for me, and I want to thank him. Great job. And the next day, Saturday, I always go to Bridges at Highlands to play Santa, and he was gracious enough to go to Bridges. And there's some video out there. He actually stayed and played with the kids and did some dancing, which I don't usually dance with the kids. But he played a great Santa, so I want to thank him. And the reason I wasn't there is I attended a wedding. So I want to congratulate Anthony and Crystal on their marriage. They got married in the Bahamas, and great residents for the city of Lake Worth. They moved in a few years ago and really invested in the community. Great neighbors. So I want to congratulate Anthony and Crystal on their wedding. Happy holidays to everyone. And before I close, I just want to make mention, and if we could have a moment of silence. We lost a very good friend in the city of Lake Worth, Barbara Jean Weber, and if you could join me in a moment of silence. And Barbara Jean usually attended meetings, and she was somebody called an angel's voice, because she always tried to find the peace in the room, and she was here quite often, and she will be missed. Thank you.
I want to actually start with that. Just a very special person. When I started here as mayor, she used to watch and ask me a million questions and follow me around and sneak outside with me when I would sneak in between meetings, and we would talk about things, and then started showing up at my doorstep at my private job and saying, "What are you doing? I just came here to see if you're having a good day. I just came here to see, I didn't see a smile on your face, and I was worried about you." And I was just a woman with a lot of compassion, with a lot of heart, a lot of love for everybody and everything. And she used to get so frustrated, and her face would get beet red when she'd sit out there if there was any fighting going up here on the day, as she would get all bottled up and tell everyone, "Calm down, everyone, calm down, please. Be kind to each other. Say nice things to each other." She was so sensitive to that. And let me tell you something. There wasn't a day that I saw that face that I didn't feel relieved that she was out there, knowing that she was there rooting us on. She cared for Lake Worth so very much, and she had a genuine love for people. And she was a gift that came to me here in this position, and I'm forever grateful for that. So thank you. And some other notes, I have been, you guys went to weddings and stuff, so I had to cover all your stuff. No, okay.
Yes, you did.
All right, I had, let's see, the TD Bank grand opening. That was really cool. They did a beautiful festival out there and the parking lot, and a band and music and hot dogs and all kinds of stuff. And what was really neat is if you go inside there, you have to take a look at it. They really got to know our community before they built that establishment, and they really took our personality into mind in every little feature that they have. And I thought that was really well done and thoughtful. Of course, we mentioned that I was at Compass for World AIDS Day and reading that proclamation there. The tree lighting, I got to flip the switch. Yeah. It's always so much fun. I would have to say the tree lighting this year was more packed than I have ever seen it, ever. I mean, it was really magnificent. And I asked at one point, all right, who's not from the city? And there was a lot of hands raised there, 2 people coming in and checking us out. And I think that we've become the real downtown of our friends over on the island, and our friends all the way out in Wellington. We've become their little official downtown to come to things. So we welcome that, and we convince them to try to relocate here if they know what's good for them. The Canvas artists, we had a meet and greet with all of the artists. Boy, was that really fantastic. This project is just amazing. And if you're not totally familiar with it, they're going to have an app from all these different murals and statues and full-scale artwork. And there'll be an app you can actually go through town. It's up, the app? Okay, the app's up. And a lot of people follow these individual artists. They have huge followings. And so when these people come into town, they'll be able to see all of these different pieces of artwork and follow the app and actually check out our town in the meantime, too. So that's really, really cool. State Representative Silvers was here for coffee talk at Clary's Corner Cafe. I don't know if anyone had a chance to see that. We thank you for doing that in the Lake Worth Towers. The Education Council, amazing. This is my mayor's education task force that we have together. And it's the mayor's, basically it's all the principals from all the local schools. We get together and find out what it is that they need and what it is that they want, and we put it together. And the ability to have such a committee like that gives us the opportunity to work together. And everyone from Erica Whitfield from the school board to the different communities. And what we do is we put projects together. Our mission this year is going to be working on attendance and also working on reading programs. And what we actually got together, because we have Palm Beach State College involved, we've got the high school involved, we've got the elementary schools, the middle schools. We're putting together mentors that'll be from the college to work with the high school kids to work with the middle school kids, middle school, elementary, and VPK. We're putting these groups together, and every month in each school we'll have that age group addressed. And we're going to start putting this together in January for the remainder of the year. And then we've got some other programs. There's a very successful program in Delray that helped them actually win the American City Award for the amazing things that they did. We're going to be taking some of their stuff and background, with us, and implementing that as we go. But in the meantime, I've got a hot group of people that want to volunteer and get this going. So we're going to start and then introduce some of these things in the meantime. So I'm very excited about that. Bryan Park, thank you so much. Mango Groves, thank you for having me at your neighborhood association meetings. Also welcome to New Little Free Library on Federal Highway, right near Veterans Park. The sign that says welcome to Lake Worth, there on the north end of town, in College Park, where the little Veterans Park is there, just north of it. We got a New Little Free Library. Also, it's by Wellesley Drive. Veterans Day Parade was absolutely incredible. Again, another stellar attendance. And bonfires, first one got rained out. Of course, that's when they put me on the news to talk about the bonfires. So I invited everyone to come. We got rained out that first time, but it was lots of fun. And thank you to WPBF for giving us a little shout out there. And the bonfires have begun. So busy, 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 busy. All right. I will look for public participation of non-agenda items and consent agenda items. We've got Richard Stowe. Come on down. How are you, my friend?
Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays.
My name is Richard Stowe. I live at 414 North Federal Highway. I serve as chair of the city tree board. I would like to make a save the date announcement about the 13th annual Festival of Trees, which takes place at the City Cultural Plaza on Saturday, February 13th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. This year, the tree board will further strengthen the festival's educational component as we transform the festival stage to an outdoor classroom. I'm pleased to announce that one of the confirmed speakers for the 2018 festival is Victor Dover, a principal of Dover Cole and Partners and author of Street Design, The Secret to Great Cities and Towns. The event is free and the public is encouraged to attend. So please put the date, Saturday, February 13th, on your calendar.
Thank you. Okay, and then I have one from Raphael Tuberon. Welcome.
Raphael Tuberon, 331 North Ave. I'd just like to amplify what you said about Barbara Jean Weber. She was an exemplary citizen, and she showed up here and made excellent comments. She was always kind and thoughtful and very respectful, as you have noted. I have one particular memory of her. August 2013, I believe, the city had just passed a referendum about heights in the city. The Florida legislature had apparently decided to nullify this vote, as far as I know. She got up here where I'm standing, and she, with tears in her eyes, and she practically got on her knees begging the city commission to write a letter merely acknowledging the fact that the vote was taken in the city. Though it was close, the majority of people had voted. And she wanted this letter to reflect the fact that the city had taken the vote. And but of course, the city attorney said, well, it's really this, they passed the buck to the legislature. The legislature did this, and if you want to deal with the legislature, fine. That plea probably dropped like a pebble in the Lake Worth Lagoon, but I'm here to say, it's all right, Barbara Jean. You showed up, you made your comments, you made a difference, and the ideas that you held dear, freedom and dignity, people around the world are suffering and dying for those values, and as long as they do, government of the people, by the people, and for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Thank you.
Thank you. Marshall Pass?
Good evening, Commissioners. First, I'd like to just follow up and mention, because Barbara Jean Weber, well, many of you knew her from commission meetings, and that's where I also met her. She was also a great member of the Bryant Park Neighborhood Association for many years, and Herman can attest to that. So, and she was very genuine, always positive, no matter what the conversation was, always willing to talk to both sides about any topic. So rest in peace wherever you be. That being said, so a couple things I want to mention. I'm also on the Bryant Park Neighborhood Association board. So while I'm not speaking for the board, I can speak as a person who lives in that neighborhood. When the what's it called, the comprehensive plan was being discussed at the Historic Preservation Board, one of the changes to the maps was being made at that conversation and presented to our president, who happens to be the chair of the Historic Preservation Board. So some of the changes were made were not brought, or at least discussed at any of the neighborhoods involved. There were 4 or 5 different areas of the city. So I just like to mention that when they do things like this, you know, it might not be a bad idea to at least let neighborhoods know, hey, we're thinking about changing your, 30 units to 40 units per acre, or whatever the changes were, or any of these things.
That's actually on the agenda
Get
this
that
evening.
involvement. But I'm saying go to the neighborhoods,
Okay.
or at least approach them, communicate with them and say, hey, would you like us to come talk to you, or have somebody from staff come talk to you and let you know and get your thoughts about these things before they just say, hey, here you go, and historic preservation and planning and zoning, put this in there, go ahead, and then just bring it to the commission, and it can get lost in a 500-page document. Things like that happen. So in any case, I'm well aware of how long it takes to make the process happen. It goes to the state and comes back, but as you know, for many years, I've done Facebook, and then I'm proud to say I've done this for longer than anybody else, of all these Facebook pages that are out there about Lake Worth. And so I watch the conversations. And while some postings go up that may or may not be correct, you're darn tooting that you're going to have commentary that is totally off base, and people have no idea what's true and what's not true, and even though they want to. So these things can help. The main reason I'm coming up to speak, though, is about I'm concerned about the CRA, and I'm not saying this in any negative way, and I'm not attacking them whatsoever. They've done some wonderful things over the years. But 2 words come to mind. One for the city in general, that's communication. We always have that challenge. Internet, no internet. If you use the internet, where do you communicate? We have a billboard out front. Not everybody reads the paper. So the CRA is in the process of, and they have made some missteps in the past. And again, this happens everywhere, so I'm not looking to knock them. But when purchasing a property and then reselling it, or at least discussion of it, it hasn't come to you yet, I'm just asking that this commission keep a close eye out of what the board, in their meetings and in their staff, while it's a small staff, they do try and they work very hard, but in looking to sell property to private entities, especially historical properties,
Thank you.
you know the backlash that can happen. So I specifically speak to just west of this building, that block. Thank you very much.
Tammy Panza?
Hi there, Tammy Panza, 160 North L. I just wanted to briefly touch on a couple different things. One, thank you for bringing Canvas to the area, from the tiniest little mural just at the Cultural Council curb to the huge words on the side of the building directly across the street from my house. It's wonderful. I wanted to address a little bit, again, I've talked about this a couple times, communication. We've had a lot of problems recently with waste pickup, and it's, I don't know if it's from before the hurricane, after the hurricane, during, but we have some miscommunication amongst the different departments of the city. For example, they've been missing pickups, and then code department will come along and fine someone for not having their trash out on the right day when that pickup that was supposed to be picked up the day before was not picked up. And one particular incident, some large debris was left at the old AT&T building. Near my house is a business, 2 huge bed mattresses. So I called the city, talked to a wonderfully polite person at the city, and said, hey, you missed my bulk pickup, but you also, can you also take this mattress that was left out at AT&T by some other person? AT&T doesn't have mattresses. It's about 10 or 12 feet off of K Street. It's on an alley that is used by dumpster dumping vehicles, so there's no problem with the claw coming in. Not only did they not pick it up upon my request, but they sent code out twice. There's two different stripes of orange paint on the side of the mattress, and I'm sure if I look up the address on the code website, there'll be a fine against AT&T for the mattress that somebody dumped on their property that I called about when they missed their pickup. They've also been dumping dumpsters at 5 a.m. in the morning on a Sunday, which I'm sure they're getting paid overtime to do, and maybe isn't exactly appropriate for a Sunday morning. It's kind of all over the place. So if you can talk to the waste removal people and the code people to tell them to talk to each other, that would be great. I also wanted to ask you guys to update the roads program website. I've seen a few bits and pieces on there, but there's still misspellings all over the place of the neighborhoods. It's still asking you to choose your neighborhood when we don't have complete coverage. Every city or every part of the city is not covered by a neighborhood. And some of the parts of the city are covered by 2 or 3 neighborhoods because there's nothing that prohibits anyone from opening up a neighborhood association in their front yard and then another one opening up another neighborhood association on top of that. We have a couple overlapping neighborhoods. So before you guys start disseminating information to neighborhoods, make sure that there are enough neighborhoods to cover everyone or provide some other alternative. And again, on about the parking issue, please help with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there any more cards?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, seeing there are none, thank you all very much. Moving on to approval of the minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Hardy, second.
Vice Mayor.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Robinson. All those in favor state so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion carries.
4-0.
4-0, you with Commissioner
Commissioner
Amoroso.
Amoroso's out. Oh.
Out of the room, yeah. Consent agenda,
So moved.
moved by the Vice Mayor,
Seconded.
seconded by Commissioner Hardy. All those in favor state so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Commissioner Robinson?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
Pleased to see that there's 2 Lake Worth businesses on the consent.
There you go. Commissioner, unanimously approved. You don't have comments on those items. Thank you. Motion carries by 4 with Commissioner Amoroso. Go.
Right.
All right, moving on to our public hearings. Did I miss anything? No. Public hearings resolution number 68-2017. Public hearing, issue a revocable permit on the property located at 631 South End Street.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second, any public comment cards?
No, Madam Mayor.
Seeing there are none, all those in favor state so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries 4. Item B, resolution number 69-2017, public hearing, issue a revocable permit on the property located at 1401 North End Street.
So moved.
Moved by the Vice Mayor, seconded by Commissioner Robinson. Any public comment cards?
No, Madam Mayor.
Seeing there are none, all those in favor state so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion carries by 4. Moving on to resolution number 70-2017, public hearing, issue a revocable permit on the property located at 1331 North End Street.
So moved.
Moved by the Vice Mayor,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Robinson. Are there any public comment cards? Seeing there are none, all those in favor state so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Commissioner Robinson?
Aye.
Aye. And Commissioner Amoroso. Motion carries unanimously. All right, moving on to item D. 10D, ordinance number 2017-27. City Attorney, would you read the ordinance for me, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Ordinance number 2017-27 of the City of Lake Worth, Florida, amending Chapter 23, Land Development Regulations, Article 5, Supplemental Regulations, Section 23.5-4, Historic Preservation, to refine policy, rules, and regulations relating to the historic preservation, providing for severability, the repeal of laws and conflicts, codification, and an effective date.
I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Hardy,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Robinson. I'll go to public comment. Darren Engel. Do you have any presentation or anything on this?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
Pamela Ryan from our office is here if you have any questions from a legal standpoint.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. Would you mind stepping up, just to be close to a microphone, just in case you need to answer any questions?
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Commissioners. Thank you for reviewing and thank you for reviewing.
Just taking it out, yeah. It's
Not
easier.
Thank you for reviewing and making revisions to the Historic Preservation Code. I've reviewed them thoroughly. I know our board's discussed them, and we're quite pleased. Two little things I'd just like to mention. One of them is the guidelines, and I know we are working on getting the guidelines, and we have the grants. And I should introduce myself, Darren Engel, 328 Ocean Breeze, his chairperson of the Historic Preservation Board. We've discussed on our board that the guidelines need to integrate the board and the public in them as well, because originally there was a comment kind of made from staff that staff will make them and then come to us for review and approval. But we really want to be part of this operation. And also roofs. This is my pet peeve on the Historic Preservation Board. A lot of the roofs that we see on our board are metal roofs, and the staff keeps making recommendations to asphalt shingles because they feel that that's more accurate for certain historic homes. And actually, metal roofs are more expensive and they're more durable in our climate. We need to really pay attention to that, and hopefully staff is a lot more flexible on that. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And Madam Mayor, I did not make a presentation because I made such a long presentation.
Yeah, that
So, I'm here if you want to hear from me.
I just thought we might have some questions.
Okay, sure.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. Per the last meeting, we talked about design guidelines for windows. And my request was that, or my statement and request was, we should certainly have a good handle on what we're asking folks to do. Have we put together that booklet or whatever of acceptable windows?
Staff is working on that. As you know, there will be a complete illustration in the design guidelines, but to help staff until that's done, we are working on having some illustrations that we will give to the public when they want to come in.
How much time do they need? It's been a month since we
wanted to make sure this got approved first, so it's in the works, and give us a couple of weeks and we'll have it done.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Mosso?
May I ask, I know Mr. Ingalls is a representative of the board, but did the board recommend that he come here?
No, the board didn't recommend, that
Or is he
come. No,
speaking
just
on his
came
own?
on his own,
Okay.
but we did tell them that it was on, first and second reading, so, we invited all of them to come speak if they felt they wanted.
Okay, because usually it's recommended that the board send a representative that speaks on behalf of the board if they choose to, or is he speaking as a lay person?
He's speaking as a layperson.
Okay.
I would say.
Okay.
I don't think you disagree.
One thing that he did say that is that when the design guidelines, because we've been waiting, I know I've been waiting 6 years for that puppy.
You will get them in
Exactly.
2018.
Yeah, but the design guidelines, I really think that when you have those meetings on them, we need to put some extra effort and or money towards publicizing those meetings so that people in the communities can come out and have an open conversation about this, because these are, we need to make sure that they're a part of that conversation. These changes are being made to help people, like the same reason we change code enforcement to code compliance. We're trying to create solutions for people, not create more problems for them, and also stay true to the integrity of the projects. I get that, you know what I mean? But we have to have them involved in the process, because commenting afterwards that the guidelines aren't right, or they aren't this, or they aren't after the fact, and not being a part of that problem. I want people to be able to be active in it and us spend the money, make sure it's in the newsletter, do what we have to do to get it out and to rally up as many people from the community to help us.
And Mayor, a part
Finalize.
of the design guidelines grant that we got from the state has a public participation component where we have to actually have physical pictures, illustrations. We have to do certain types of advertising on our website, they made us put that in there.
Mm-hmm.
And we will try to do as much as possible, sending out, personal invitations to the different, homeowners associations as well.
Was a lot of the comments that I get are that, well, it's very selective that they should have chosen this here when they allow this one to do that there. And, we get that back and forth all the time. So I really would like for people to be a part of that, to see. And one thing drives me crazy is, lack of consistency.
Sure.
So this hopefully will give us a little consistency in those decisions. Commissioner Robinson?
That's why I was interested in the communication part that was mentioned earlier.
Okay.
That the streaming of these meetings, planning and zoning and historic preservation, is important. And I don't know if it's a budget item, but I want to make sure those meetings are streamed.
Okay. Commissioner Hardy?
I agree wholeheartedly with what the mayor just said about making sure that the public is involved in this process and that they're aware about everything that we're doing at every step. And I agree with what Mr. Engel just said. I certainly don't think that staff should cook up the design guidelines and then present a finished product to HRPB for approval. It should definitely be an interactive and collaborative process. And then the other thing is that these design guidelines should not be a thicket of confusing potentialities for people who own a home. It needs to be very much a guide. And it can't just be a book of here's what you may do of designs that people may choose. I think we should perhaps investigate doing a market survey so that we can not only say, okay, here's the designs and here's all the things that we know about. If this is what fits your house, here's everything that we know about where you can get this stuff. It needs to be a process where people can do it without turning it into a research project for themselves. And I also agree with what Mr. Robinson just said, and I can say that as someone who was seeking over the past several years to get educated about the city, the video of the various meetings that have been had here, not just the commission meetings, but the planning and zoning and the HRPB, that stuff is invaluable to citizens who are trying to learn more about the city that they live in and its workings. And I think that we definitely need to revive that. I understand that we've got a new system here and it might be a budget line item. I value transparency enough to want to pony up for that. Some people say transparency is expensive. I would say it's priceless. So let's make sure that we get video of these meetings out, because you learn a lot more that way. And that's all I have to say.
Commissioner Amoroso?
And I just wanted to comment on that. So Commissioner Hardy, I actually asked staff today about, because originally I said, I'd like 4 recommendations for doors, 4 recommendations for windows, 4 recommendations for roof, very clear, precise. But we also cannot recommend, just like we can't recommend a contractor, we can't recommend that you get it at X, Y, and Z. But I did say I want to make sure that the products that we're recommending are known products that can be gotten locally where people are going, like Home Depot and Lowe's and ABC doors and windows. It has to be something accessible. We cannot put on a sheet and recommend it legally, is what I'm hearing.
Well, what we have done, and we will continue to do this, is to say these are the places that have the products. We're not telling you to go there, but they have the products.
Okay.
One of our initiatives will be to reach out to some of the bigger places like Home Depot, because we have a lot of people coming to us with windows from Home Depot. They have the representative from Home Depot come with them, and they find out that they haven't followed the guidelines. So if Home Depot or Lowe's will allow us to educate them and to tell them the products that we want them to order, we think that they will do so.
Great.
So that is a part of the initiative that staff plans to do in conjunction with the design guidelines.
Great, thank you.
Make it easier.
Oh, well, that sounds terrific. I wasn't even think you'd be able to go that far with it.
Yeah.
I was thinking that it would be more like, you can use a product made from this material that's this millimeters thick, or that millimeter, whatever, made from these choice. I thought, if you can get the stores to show you a sample.
We're gonna try.
You show me. I can't wait.
The fact that they will have representatives come to the meetings to
Right.
try to get us to approve their products means that they're very interested in it. So
Absolutely.
if we can just kind of
Bypass that.
steer them in the right
Yeah.
direction, it'll save all of us a lot of time.
Okay, city manager?
Madam Mayor, thank you. Circling back to the ordinance that's before you, and all these are projects that everybody's working on, and we appreciate the input. But the ordinance, I don't want to miss the significance. This has been over a year plus, it seems, in the works. We had to pull this all together. The focus was trying to get direction specifically from you about what we wanted to see staff functioning within this rule of law codes, and focusing on windows, doors, roofs, fences, backyards, the basic things. And we've often said that this ordinance, if we get this passed and implemented, that it should address 80% of a lot of the problems people have encountered in working in these rules. So we're very hopeful that this is a significant step in making historic preservation, historic districts work well, work better, and be more user-friendly, be more, gives staff a better set of tools to work with too. So we're hoping to see some of these conflicts and issues come down. As we work towards these other items, that's going to even be better. So all of this is many steps, and I hope people can appreciate the significance of this ordinance tonight that's being approved. Just wanted to add that.
Thank you. We've got a motion on the floor and
Well,
this.
I'd just like to say that the overall purpose.
Commissioner Robinson?
Oh, you had the light on. The overall purpose of historic preservation is.
Glasses in the way. Sorry.
Okay. The overall purpose is to maintain the character, historic character, the character of the neighborhood. And, you know, we struggle prioritizing code. We struggle with prioritizing material to a certain extent. And the underlying purpose of historic preservation was to maintain the character of the neighborhood. So I still hope we don't get tied up in it's important, but it's still the character of the neighborhood that's the bottom line.
I agree. All right, we've got a motion on the floor in a second. All those in favor state so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item E, resolution number 71-2017, public hearing. Approve a historic preservation ad valorem tax exemption for property located at 226 South L Street.
So moved.
Moved by the Vice Mayor, seconded by Commissioner Hardy. Any public comment cards?
Madam Mayor.
Seeing there are none, all those in favor state so by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
A wonderful project.
It is. Item number 10F, City Attorney, would you read the ordinance for me?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Ordinance number 2017-23 of the City of Lake Worth, Florida, amending the comprehensive plan by providing a small-scale amendment change to the future land use map of certain property more fully described in Exhibit A from a City of Lake Worth future land use designation of mixed-use east to a City of Lake Worth designation of artisanal mixed use, providing that conflicting ordinances are repealed, providing for severability, and providing an effective date.
I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second? Need a second to move on and continue discussing.
I'll second it.
Okay. You have a presentation? William? Is there any handouts? No?
This was presented at the last commission meeting. This is a second reading for the small scale.
Oh, this is, okay, I'm sorry. All right, I was looking at. Nope, I gotcha. Okay. Any questions, city commissioners? All right, any public comment cards?
No, Madam Mayor.
Seeing there are none, we've got a motion and a second. All those in favor state so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries 4-1. Moving on to ordinance number 2017-24, City Attorney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ordinance number 2017-24 of the City of Lake Worth, Florida, changing the zoning of the property described in Exhibit A from a City of Lake Worth zoning of mixed-use east to a City of Lake Worth zoning of artisanal industrial, providing that conflicting ordinances are repealed, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second. Any public comment cards?
No, Madam Mayor.
Seeing there are none, is there anything to add to it, William?
No, nothing changed since last time.
Okay, all those in favor state so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those
Aye.
opposed? Motion carries 4-1. Moving on to ordinance number 2017-25, City Attorney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ordinance 2017-25, the City of Lake Worth, Florida, amending the city's comprehensive plan to adopt evaluation and appraisal-based amendments pursuant to Section 163.3191 Florida statutes, which provides for a comprehensive update to the goals, objectives, and policies of all elements, including revised text and maps necessary to update the data and analysis of the comprehensive plan, providing that the text and maps as amended shall replace in full the existing text and maps in all amended elements, providing for a transmittal to the State Land Planning Agency, providing a conflicts clause, a severability clause, and providing an effective date.
I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Seconded.
Moved by Vice Mayor Pro Tem Andrea Moroso, seconded by Commissioner Hardy. And Commissioner Hardy.
Yes, so I spoke with the city manager and staff about some issues that they might be minor as far as the text of this document. I just wanted to make sure. I obviously don't want to hold up the transmittal process. There were some issues as far as in the education section about the city doing things to help charter schools locate within the city that did not sit well with me. I just want to make sure that we can change those in between the first and second transmittal process.
Okay, for the record, William Waters, Community Sustainability Director. There is a comment period, review period, once it's transmitted to the state. It may last as long as 45 days or a little bit longer. In that time, we can review items that come up. If you would like to make changes between what is being transmitted to the state, those will have to all be enumerated at the next hearing, which is likely to be the end of January, mid-February. And those changes taken into account at that point, you would vote on them. If there is a majority, those items could be included, and then it's sent back to the state for their final review.
So this document can be changed, I guess, in between.
We changed the last one
Sure.
in 2009 between the first and second readings.
Okay. Well, just so that my colleagues on the dais know the things in particular that kind of caught my eye and that did not sit well with me. If you look at the education part, objective 10.1.3, there's a part about Lake Worth investigating options available to improve local education opportunities. Awesome. Included but not limited to the implementation of a charter school program. Not awesome. So that was in particular what I was looking at. The other thing, objective 10.1.4, again, talks about attracting charter schools to the city. I'm obviously not a fan. I tend to think charter schools tend to divert resources from our public schools, which need them desperately. I'm investigating overcapacity at Highland Elementary, which is an issue. So, I certainly don't want the city to play any role in furthering the diversion of public resources to private organizations when our own public schools are in such a needy situation right here in the city. So I just want to make sure that in between this first and the second period that we can have a discussion about omitting this stuff from our policies, which is the way that we are apparently going to try to achieve our goals. I certainly want to applaud staff for putting together this document. It is a magnificent and our consultant. It is a really magnificent document. I love the fact that we've got an economic development component in here, which is critical, especially for a city like ours. We need to be articulating goals about economic development in what is kind of like our Bible for growth here in this city. I'm so glad that we've articulated goals and policies for that going forward. The other thing, again, as regards education, I'm really glad that we've got these two policies in here about, first of all, making sure that the commission is informed about education-friendly legislation. We see lots of legislation every single legislative session about education. I'm really glad that the staff is basically making a commitment to keeping us informed about how legislation at the state level is going to affect us and our ability to improve our schools here. And it's important because even though they're not within our control per se, right? Obviously, there's a school district that does a pretty good job. It still affects us. and we can all pass the buck to the school board, or we can do what it is that is within our powers to make our school better. And I really, really appreciate staff's focus on this issue. So those were really the only issues that I have with this document. It's really great, really, really fantastic.
Thank you very much. Richard Garcia? I'm sorry, Commissioner Wilson, do you want to talk first? No.
Richard Garcia, 720 South
Did you
Palm
want
Lane.
the staff's presentation before we take public comment? Or
Oh.
not?
Yeah, I didn't know you had a presentation.
It's the first reading, we do.
Oh, okay, thank you.
One moment.
You guys got off on public comment card. Never mind. Hold that thought. Commissioner Amoroso, did you want to make a comment?
I just wanted to ask, the charter school piece, where did that come from? Is that something that is generally in it? Who came up with the charter school piece, or is it?
If you will, we have a little bit of verbiage about each one of the sections.
Okay.
And instead of jumping around, we can go sequentially through the elements that are there, give you the presentation, and then we can get back to when we get to the education section where that sort of came from.
They were already giving out praise. I was already going right to the end.
Well, this is probably one of the more momentous meetings we've had since I've been with the city. And it's really important that we have a complete understanding of what the impacts will be on this and how important it is for the city to move forward to be the sustainable community neighborhoods that it can be.
Normally we have a handout. That's why when there's a presentation, we have a handout that accompanies
We were working on
it.
it until...
So that's why we weren't anticipating it, so forgive us.
But now it's up. So this is our December 5th transmittal hearing. I want to recognize Nilsa Zacharias, who's been imperatively important for working with all of our city departments to get this to a stage where it can be presented to you. It was actively worked on by all the departments and all the department directors, which is unlike previous comprehensive plans. Mark Stivers, who's our new Assistant Director for Planning and Preservation, has also been very instrumental in the couple of months that he's been here. And it's just great that we are at this point. So I want to go over a little bit of the history. We'd had, wow, this is really delayed. Jeez. Okay, sorry about the technical difficulties. So we had public workshops with the Planning and Zoning Board and the Historic Preservation Board, as well as with the City Commission. There have been 2 each for both of you, going over what is a comprehensive plan, what it includes, the state of our current comprehensive plan, and what was anticipated to be done with it to improve it through this ear-based amendment process. We are now in the transmittal stage process with the public hearings. There was already a public hearing with the Planning and Zoning Board, November 1st, with the Historic Resource Preservation Board, November 8th, and today is our transmittal hearing where we'll review it and hopefully approve it and send it on to the state for their review. And I'll try to go through this fairly fast if we'll keep up. The chapters of our comprehensive plan are known as elements. We have modified 4 of them from our current comprehensive plan. The most important one that's been changed is housing and neighborhoods. We've included a neighborhood function, and we'll go into what's been changed in the context of that. We've added electric utility function to the infrastructure and utility section. The education section has been changed, its name and focus, and then we have a whole new element called economic development. Each element includes goals, objectives, and policies to further the city into the future in a window of 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So this is not something about showing what is happening today. It is demonstrating and directing us on what we can put in place for Lake Worth tomorrow. So part of the creation of the comprehensive plan were an official series of maps. Fortunately, we now have a GIS office, which we did not have in 2009 in prior codes. So these are all the different types of maps that have been created to support the policies and objectives. Those are included as part of the comprehensive plan within the sections that are there. Another important piece are the levels of service that have been demonstrated. Those are included in the data and analysis. Nilsa and her group, as well as working with staff, created the data and analysis to support the conclusions and policies that are in the comprehensive plan. Our current comprehensive plan does not have a data and analysis section at all. How it was found in compliance in 2011, I'm not quite sure, but we don't complain about that now. We're going to fix it moving forward. The data and inventory analysis maps. There was a whole series of those looking at what our current resources are, our service areas, what areas will be impacted by the comprehensive plan, and here's a list of those. The focus of the comprehensive plan is recognizing that Lake Worth is the city of neighborhoods that is striving to be the best version of Lake Worth that it can be, and be a sustainable community moving into a future that is financially stable, sustainable culturally, ecologically, historically, and socially. Future land use. This element was updated in 2012 as a separate large-scale amendment. This is a further update of that. It looks at what we envision the future uses of various areas of the city will be. This is a future land use map as it's proposed. There are some changes that affect various areas of the city, looking at trying to encourage a wider variety of housing types and typologies in the city, and increasing the opportunities for residential development in the city. There are also some expansions of our transportation-oriented development areas and artisanal industrial areas to provide a stronger economic base for the city and more opportunities for live, work, and play. And we can always jump back to some of these things later if you would like to. So we're focusing on more residential and artisanal uses. We are lessening the focus on commercial and office. There's a diversification of land uses so we can encourage mixed-use projects, which in some of the language that we have, our mixed-use projects have a focus on residential being the primary use, with secondary uses being something like commercial, office, or retail. We're encouraging in certain areas like TOD, higher densities, intensities, and in some of our multifamily districts. And we're trying to provide an incentive or mechanism to facilitate more infill and redevelopment of blighted areas, especially the ones that Mr. Omari was speaking about earlier. There's quite a challenge in the city to encourage redevelopment and investment, so we're hoping that many components in here set the stage to have that happen. Transportation is an important element for the city. We are looking at trying, in the future, focusing on multimodal transportation, complete street strategies, and we are looking at a variety of complete street definitions. Many of our rights of way do not accommodate a complete street approach in its traditional definition, but we do want to look at trying to provide as complete a street as we can within the right-of-way constraints that we do have. Trying to link public transit, workforce housing, economic development. Developing a pedestrian and bicycle master plan to have as many means to get around the city as possible that will actually preclude or discourage the use of a car, because most of our rights of way are limited in their capacity and ability to be expanded. Housing in neighborhoods I touched on a little bit. The focus here is a move away from an overemphasis on affordable housing. We did include the neighborhood map. This map didn't exist for the previous or current comprehensive plan. We are focusing, the state statute does require us to focus on some types of housing for workforce, so we have reorganized and included that. The element does focus on diversifying housing supply and increasing the availability and variety of as many housing typologies and values as we can. Again, the focus is on a community of neighborhoods. We've also proposed in here a neighborhood planning program whereby we would establish at some point a program whereby neighborhoods could take advantage of a laundry list of items the city could help them with. The neighborhoods could prioritize those items. We could figure out how to have them funded over time, and there would be an active voice between the neighborhoods as well as the city. Infrastructure, which is very important, I think all of you. We've already made a commitment with the neighborhood road program, the 2-inch steel water line program. We've included the electric utility in the infrastructure section, established levels of service for all the various elements that are covered here. This probably is one section that changed the most because our infrastructure section was woefully inadequate. It also feeds into the capital improvement section, which we'll look at in a couple of minutes. Coastal management, I'm going to run through these. There were a number of state mandated requirements for us to deal with sea level rise and climate change. Those have been adopted. The coastal management is also focusing on energy efficiency, greenhouse gases, and protecting the city's unique ecological environment along the coast. We also, through this element and the next one, are focusing on both sustainability in the long term, as well as resiliency, which is the city's ability to bounce back in the face of adversity, such as a catastrophic storm or other natural disaster. We're focusing again on the urban forestry plan, trying to improve and increase tree coverage in the city, and looking at the other ecological elements in the city that might need some attention. Recreation open space was another element that got a lot of attention. We have developed formal levels of service for both passive and active parks within the city. Provided a map here that demonstrates where we have right now recreation open space opportunities. We do recognize that many of our recreation open space options are not in the best location. So we want to spend some time over the next coming years to increase, enhance, and preserve parks and open space in the place that best suits the residents that need them. One element that comes out of this is a focus on an open space recreation plan that will look at where is the best place to locate parks so that every neighborhood has a reasonable access to a park, passive or active, in a probably quarter mile or less walking distance. We did not include John Prince Park as part of our park structure since it is in the county, but as a significant resource it's under tax for the city, and hopefully we can look at through this policy as well better interaction and cooperation between us and the county on utilizing that park for our residents. Intergovernmental coordination. This is a required element that really talks about how we plan and do things in the city and coordinating that with other municipalities in our jurisdiction as well as the region and the county. It's pretty simple. We already do this to a great degree. One piece that was focus of this section is the renewable energy that we're trying to work on with CIMREC and the ocean currents, and working together in a comprehensive way. Another piece that this element will affect is the sea level rise challenges that Palm Beach County and South Florida will have. Hopefully we'll be able to encourage a regional approach to this versus a city by city or county by county approach, because what happens to one area does affect us and vice versa. Capital improvement, which you all have discussed at least very vigorously for the past 5 years. We're looking at prioritizing infrastructure needs, ensuring the appropriate construction, replacement, and maintenance of capital facilities, working in that as new development comes in, there are incentives and mechanisms that the private development does carry its load and improve the infrastructure necessary to run it, such as water, sewer, stormwater, and electric. The neighborhood road program is here, and the current capital improvement plan with its schedule and what projects are there are also included as part of the comprehensive plan. That 5-year schedule will be updated either on an annual or biennial basis as new projects are identified. Commissioner Amari discussed a little bit the education section. This came out of a discussion at a number of 2 different workshops that education was very important for the future of the city. Education more than just our primary and public schools, but looking at skilled labor, blue collar skill investment, white collar skill investment, working with a community college, trying to provide the best opportunities for our citizens to attain their GED or skills that are necessary to encourage their being able to obtain a job. We also passed recently, I think it was back in February, an interlocal agreement with the Palm Beach School Board that focuses a little bit on our interaction with them. This section also focuses a little bit on the safe access to our schools. Some of those issues have already been addressed with the neighborhood improvement program, and you're continuing with your CDBG monies in some of the more disadvantaged neighborhoods in the city. The item that Commissioner Amari brought up is that in looking at our educational challenges. In discussions when we were working on this section, we felt it appropriate to at least put out there every opportunity there was to improve our secondary school education access and options. We do have 2 charter schools in the city now. They've done, I think, reasonably well. There has been requests over time from various people that why we do not have more of them, because it seems that a number of citizenry and questions have come up that it seems that working with a smaller constituency at a charter school is easier to get improvements and investments than going through the bureaucracy of Palm Beach County School Board. That could be debatable. And this is an element that will probably bring up more conversation between now and the next hearing. But we do have a major challenge. The city does not have much influence over the graduation rates, the quality of the schools being an A or an F or a D. The Mayor's Education Council has really brought forward an educational dialogue among the various schools and has got us a little bit. But for us to attract the residents that we need to serve as a basis for economic development initiatives and to improve the economic status and financial stability of a city, our education options have to improve. And so that's why we changed that section to education versus I think it was called public schools. So economic development is a newest section. There was a great deal of collaboration among also the city staff and the economic development director to incorporate this, looking at targeted areas for business expansion, retention, or development. We collaborated with the Business Development Board, Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. The economic development portions are focused on sustainable development that does not overwhelm or significantly change the overall character of Lake Worth. As we mentioned earlier in the presentation, we are trying to increase the artisanal industrial areas of the city to focus on our cultural arts and the broadest array of classes of uses that fall into that category, and looking at incentives that we can utilize to create job creation, retain the jobs that we have, and also focus on attracting new targeted industries such as the ones associated with CIMRAC, which is the Gulf Stream current electric generation. So as a summary, the comprehensive plan, and this is in no particular order, is supporting and focusing on renewable energy as an option for the city to be a cutting-edge city in the state, if not the nation, if not the world, that we have the potential to be a completely renewable energy-based community. We're focusing on green development and redevelopment through incentives and encouragement of those types of developments that utilize to the best our resources and infrastructure, focusing on increasing parks and open space to accommodate the new residents that will be coming to the city and access to those open spaces. We adopted sea level rise strategies, which I mentioned earlier. And I'm really sorry this is as slow as it is. Trying to promote the widest opportunities for employment, not only for our citizenry, but also people from the outside, because we do have neighboring communities that are almost all exclusively residential, and an appropriate area for economic opportunity and jobs would be Lake Worth. Diversifying the housing supply not only in type, but also in value, and removing the overemphasis on low, moderate, and super low income housing. Protecting our historic neighborhoods. One of the things you just passed, the change in the preservation ordinance, will hopefully work much more progressively and in a productive manner to preserve our historic neighborhoods in a more collaborative way that's easier for people to understand and get through the process. We talked about the neighborhood planning program to stabilize neighborhoods, complete streets. There's only 2 more. And prioritizing infrastructure needs as you've been doing over the past couple of years. Many of the things that we've included in policies here do set the stage for the city to more aggressively go after grants, funding opportunities both at the state and federal level, and establish that the city has committed to doing certain things to improve its future, so that when we go our applications and requests have a higher chance of being adopted and accepted and have a higher probability of being funded. We've struggled with that since I've been here and probably long before, that our goals and aspirations for the city didn't really match what we had adopted in policies. Some of these things we've actually included in our previous update. Preserving historic character and neighborhood patterns has been a focus at least for the past 7 years. Encouraging sustainable practices has been feathered through our LDRs, land development regulations, as well as the policies and procedures for water, sewer, and electric, which are coming. Stimulating a vibrant economy, and if you did come to our forum several years ago, you might recognize this slide because it's the same one. Facilitating public participation and awareness, and understanding some of the comments that were made earlier. The neighborhood planning program will, as we put it together, serve as a vehicle to establish a mechanism to communicate more aggressively, communication between the city and the neighborhoods of the city. So we can go back and look at whatever questions you might have, but that's our gigantic 700-page document in a real big nutshell. We will transmit it to the state hopefully after tonight. They have a 60-day review. They may not take the whole 60 days. Then we'll schedule, when we have an idea of when it's going to come back, we will schedule an adoption hearing, hopefully sometime in February. It'll be transmitted back to the state and they will give us a notice of intent to approve it and within 45 days. So hopefully by the end of March, we'll have this all in place.
Can you please send us all a copy of that PowerPoint presentation too, so we
Yes.
have it? And it's funny because I had a conversation with Mr. Waters earlier today, and I said that not by not having our priorities. In fact, you know, when I sit on the MPO and I watch as projects happen fast in other communities, and there are specific communities, one of which I know that you work for, that always seems to get these projects, complete streets projects, updates to things, but they've already been in the works. As Mr. You grazed over the fact that back just in 2011, we didn't have GIS systems.
Well, I didn't want to spend too much time focusing on the negative.
No, I'm saying though, but that
we could be here all
no,
night.
but people wonder why. What I'm saying is the other communities get to move a lot faster because they've had those systems in place to have the plans ready to actually produce. Where we've been covering a lot of ground, and I think we've done an outstanding job. And kudos to our staff for getting us up to speed in such a short amount of time. That now we actually have the abilities to go after these monies and get these projects working within our communities. So having this outline for us, so to speak. It was a small word for such a big, beautiful project, but I'm excited at the possibilities that can now come our way because we're ready. And I really, really appreciate all of your work, the entire staff.
It's
Thank you.
taken a long time, and I believe the city manager has been very diligent in putting together the appropriate management people who could actually collaborate with our department to bring this about. If we had attempted this 5 years ago, it probably would have been not that fun and probably not a very positive.
People that aren't in the trenches, that they don't know, they say, well, you can get a grant for that. Can't you just get a grant for this and a grant for that and a this and a that and a this? They don't know that you can't, that you have to go through these processes and have these projects shovel ready, and they have to have, it has to be ready and vetted, and it's a long process. So having them ready now, we're able to go get those grants finally. And get these projects started. So I'm very excited about it. Commissioner Hardy?
Yeah, you said that this was probably the most important meeting you've taken part of. It's certainly the most important meeting I've been a part of since I've been on the commission. I think this is probably the most monumental change that the city is going to experience as a result of this comprehensive plan that you guys have put together. I think it makes really good use of the good bones that we have. I'm not going to say what community I was driving around in this weekend, but I was driving around in a community this weekend. And I seriously wondered whether the cars in that community had taken over and and started voting instead of the people. We have such great natural resources here, and it's a great thing to see us make use of them. Emphasis on mixed use is great. The expansion of TOD is great. It's a really tremendous opportunity. Transit-oriented development. And my one question is I think we all up here have acknowledged in our own various ways that more people in the city is a good thing, especially if they're contributing citizens, and Richard Radcliffe, the executive director for the League of Cities, made a comment that when, for example, our population is undercounted, every individual that isn't counted costs the city $1,200, right, annually, right? And so, by extension, every individual that we add to the city gains the city $1,200 in revenue from various grant sources, for example, community development block grant. And I'm wondering, why didn't we express, I guess, explicitly in here as a goal, the goal of bringing in more, obviously, contributing people, increasing our population. Obviously, I see it in the land use map. I see it in the TOD. I see it in the densities. But as a goal, I certainly would have liked to have seen that there as a goal in the city.
It may not be as explicit, but encouraging a wider diversity and availability of housing for our neighborhoods, by consequence, are going to bring more residents to the city. If you delve into the really boring section of the comp plan, if the first part's not boring enough, the data and analysis goes into what we envision as being our population projections moving forward. And there is an aggressive goal to grow the city, fill the city with productive residents who live, work, shop, have homes here, contribute to the livelihood of the city. Nilsa and her group spent a great deal of time establishing estimates and goals in the data and analysis that are reasonable and achievable and will not overwhelm the city by 2040 with too many people being here. And so it is a managed approach to growth, but it is a more aggressive approach to growth than we've had in the past.
I appreciate that, and I'll be sure to delve into the other 400 pages of this document. The other thing is, some people have expressed some concerns about densities and intensities and the transit-oriented development sections, which, so for those people who are concerned that we're losing our character, obviously TOD that we might do here is certainly different than transit-oriented development that gets done in other places, in terms of what we're shooting for.
Mm-hmm.
And so to, I guess, assuage some of the concerns that people might have, could you, I guess, explain how other cities might do TOD very differently than the way that we're attempting to allow TOD to happen here in this city? And by TOD, I mean transit-oriented development.
Well, on the basis of them, they're rather similar. It is focusing on an appropriate mix of uses, predominantly residential, to support and provide a basis for multimodal transportation, either rapid transit, light rail, train, those sorts of things. You may have seen in the paper that West Palm Beach just approved its major TOD, which is a gigantic project. It's been going on 15 years, 16 years maybe? Michael R. Moore and others. Where the difference is that we have a number of mechanisms in place that limit how big and how overwhelming a TOD project can be in Lake Worth. The most important one is a charter amendment limiting height in the city east of Dixie Highway at 65 feet, west of Dixie Highway to 100 feet. Our current zoning, which matches up almost letter by letter to our comprehensive plan on the height table, TOD has a threshold limit of 55 feet and 5 stories if a station is incorporated. There is a mechanism to possibly go higher than that and increase densities. When we had a study, we were very fortunate that the regional group that was looking at multimodal train stations and TODs in South Florida, specifically Palm Beach County, Broward County, Dade County, chose Lake Worth to look at because we were one of the first ones that adopted a focus on TODs in 3 areas that we really wanted to see a intra-service coastal link train station to eventually be established. Hopefully by 2025 there'll be at least one. Those were at the downtown area close to where we are, at Lake and Lucerne and the FEC. The other one is at 10th Avenue North and the FEC, and the other one is floating around because it's too close to North Station. If it's one place, it's too close to where Lantana might have one. It's around between 9th and 12th Avenue South. When they looked at what we had allowed in our development potential, the potential tax money generated would not support or would barely support a train station being established. There are monies available to get the infrastructure in place to have a station, but there's not operational money. So if we ever get a coastal link, we might be able to build the station, but there are going to be people looking, or regional entities like the South Florida Regional Transit Authority, to look at subsidies to have those trains actually work in the city. And we might be asked as a city to make some kind of contribution to have that train been through our city and stop at our station. We needed to figure out a mechanism to increase the development potential so that the city can afford to support a station if it came along. And that study was very important to us, is that we thought we had gotten it pretty close, but we hadn't quite gotten there. And then as time has progressed forward over the past 7 years since I've been here, development costs, land acquisition costs, development costs have gone up. So trying to encourage the type of development in those redevelopment areas that will support the station has become more of a challenge.
So what you're saying is that one of the goals of transit-oriented development here in the city, given that we've got potentially Coastal Link coming in here, setting up shop in one of 3 locations, one of the goals has to be to generate sufficient density to cover the operating costs of
Or
a station
the
that might
ridership
come
that's
here.
needed.
Right, or we might not get a station.
Right,
So
exactly.
it's really critical, basically, if we don't want the Coastal Link ship to pass us, if we don't want to miss that boat, to have the TOD and the densities and intensities that we have here in the area.
Right, and we've already prioritized that. The first station we like to see is right here by City Hall. The second one is 10th Avenue North, and the third one will be in the southern portion of the city. And so as those areas are redeveloped and the Coastal Link happens, then we've already established how we would like to see our train station sequence be put in place. It does require collaboration among every party between now at this point Palm Beach Gardens and possibly farther north all the way to Miami for the Coastal Link to work. But as if you spend any time on 95 or the Turnpike, adding more cars to that road is just not going to work.
Sure. And as a city, we probably got to do our part to encourage development patterns that make mass transit actually more viable. My last question is that I was looking at the agenda for Treasure Coast Regional Planning this Friday, and there was a TOD grant that would have helped us plan the TOD areas that we have here that we basically applied for that we didn't rank highly enough to get, I guess, as we're going into this process.
Mm-hmm.
And so, my question is, are the things that we have here in this comprehensive plan, is that going to better prepare us in the future to get that kind of South Florida Regional Transit Authority grant money to do stuff like that, so we won't have to pony up the dollars ourselves, and so that we can get the best possible plans and maps going into situations like that? That was one thing that kind of concerned me.
For sure.
Okay.
Because of the study that was done, and I can't remember when they actually finished it, it may be 4 years ago. Lake Worth, even though we were lucky to get the initial studies from that group, and I think it was the 7-7 group, and then the bang for the buck in a planning element, if your plan that you have in place for development would not allow or barely create the economic basis for a train station, why would you spend more time studying it? So that's probably why we did not rank as high as we could. Now that we've hopefully adopting another mechanism, we will rank higher in looking at what that ultimate vision for the TOD might be and how it could hopefully encourage a station here sooner rather than later.
This will be my last follow-up. So are you basically saying that because we weren't aggressive enough initially, we didn't get this grant money, and that because we are potentially being more aggressive now, we serve to stand a little better when we I mean, because the cities on that list, it didn't seem like we were competing very well. I mean, obviously large metropolitan areas got the grant money, but there are some smaller cities, Wilton Manors, got the grant money, qualified for it, and we didn't rank nearly as highly as them. So you're basically saying that the aggressiveness that I see here in this future land use map is going to help us, and in this comprehensive plan is going to help us qualify for grant money in the future.
Should. I can't
Okay.
promise that it will. We do have some stiff competition out there. Wilton Manors is a really good example of a city that somehow turned a sow's ear into sort of a silk purse.
Yeah.
They made a commitment 15 years ago to make a city out of nothing, and they've come a long, long way. We are behind them, but we are catching up very fast. I will say that a number of other communities have been watching what we're proposing to do, because we've been very successful at managing, preserving the character that everybody in Lake Worth values so much, but also encouraging what I feel is very sensitive development that's not going to overwhelm the city, and we're not going to become Delray Beach, which I've heard probably at least once a day for 7 years. But we do envision Lake Worth being the best version of itself it can be, and mass transit needs to play a role in that. Because we will have people that would like to live here and not have to drive to work, because driving to work from Lake Worth to an employment center that's really big is not going to be very fun. So they can hop on a train, have a nice experience, get back a nice experience that will work well for us to attract residents to the city.
Awesome.
Thank you, Commissioner Omari. Commissioner Amoroso.
I just want to take a moment and thank you and your staff for doing a great job. You know, I think one of my biggest challenges has been to keep the small town feel, but have enough smart growth to move us forward, and I think this document does that. I want to go back for a moment to charter schools, how I agree with Commissioner Hardy on charter schools, but North grade is almost at capacity. I've heard, you know, the challenges of the students, where do they go next? I do know that one of our charter schools is one of our only A schools. So I would, you know, I would embrace maybe keeping it in until we have other options. I don't know, and I haven't heard, maybe you know, if Palm Beach County is looking to do more schools, but I know that, you know, the challenge is there that they're not, where a charter school may or may not be able to fill that gap of something like a North grade. So, you know, I would, you know, probably be opt to keep it in just so we had options, because the last thing I want to is to start losing all our students to outside of Lake Worth because there are no options. And again, one of the charter schools is our only A school at the moment, and they've been an A school almost since they were created.
Can you wrap that up in 30 seconds?
I'll try. Basically, so I certainly appreciate the need to have a range of choices for students, especially here in Lake Worth. And it's not necessarily about the students' choices per se, I guess, in terms of the incentives that we're trying to create. It's really about what's going on in the minds of the parents. And so one of the things that I think is really important, and this is a part of a larger conversation that we need to have about Central Palm Beach County and about working with our other governmental partners, such as the county and the school district, is that basically we are almost considered, like, you know, outside of the Glades, like the county's problem child, right? And so, like, we've got all of these issues that need to be solved, and oh gosh, why can't Central Palm Beach County get its stuff together? Well, one of the reasons why Central Palm Beach County can't get its stuff together is because both the county administration and the school district is so busy accommodating urban flight, out from these areas to the west. They're so busy throwing money west to overcrowding issues out west when it comes to the school district, to road widening projects out west, which is exacerbating our development patterns, which already aren't great. And I think it's about time for us, instead of, I guess, kind of waving the white flag and saying, oh, you know, we have to resort to these other, you know, non-traditional measures that in the long-term scheme of things further hamper the ability of the majority of schools in Lake Worth to be great. Instead of, I guess, trying to encourage and continue to foster that, I think all of us need to stand up and go to the county and go to the school district and say, hey, I understand we're at overcapacity here, but please solve our problems too. I know that there are overcapacity issues at schools out west where people want to go because they don't want to go to school with children in urban communities, and I'll leave it that way. But we need to have our issues solved and looked at as seriously. And so that's something I've been working on with some school board members. I'll continue to try and get our schools some attention, but I don't necessarily think that the solution is to just wave the right flag and say, let's see what we can do to get charter schools in here. I think we should be seeing what we can do and devote 100% of our energies to improving the public schools and the vocational schools and those sorts of traditional educational opportunities that it's not like they don't work. They just haven't been invested in this area of the city. Now, the money goes south, the money goes north. Central Palm Beach County is, you know, like the redheaded stepchild asking for some more, please. So that's all I have to say about that.
Good. Thank you very much. Commissioner Robinson, please.
Couple things, and I think it's a terrific. This is hopefully going to recognize some more of our potential. We're going to pay a price here and there, but we do need to grow, what is it, 50,000 to get the CDBG money to ourselves. So that's doable by 2020.
No, 2020 is only 2 years away.
That's doable by 2020.
We're going to try really hard, but I don't want to promise that.
It's doable. And the sooner the better, because then we will be able to have more money to put into our community. But the sacrifice of some areas is to the greater good of the community. I'm certainly not I'm certainly a fan of education, but charter schools are a problem, aren't being addressed by our state and county and even federal governments. So we're the last ones to affect change. One of our charter schools has portables that has had for years.
Not on the agenda.
And the emphasis on cooperation, partnerships with the school board. If we're going to emphasize education, we need to bring our schools into our community. The high school and just the alumni and the football team and the band and the ownership of the kids that are there, the reading programs. That's how we're going to affect change in education. I don't think, government has a tremendous amount to do, but I think our community, the more volunteers we have in a PTA, we don't have a PTA, but if we had the mayor's educational group needs to. Looking forward to all the good things that are going to come from cooperating with the school system and the county government itself. But I'm really hopeful that this is going to take us to a new level of new citizenry in Lake Worth. So I'm looking forward to the future.
Okay, we need to take a 5-minute break real quickly, and we'll be right back.